wasn't like Richard Dawkins' nihilistic atheist or Neil deGrasse Tyson, that kind of blight on the human soul and human civilization. He was more of like, I've decided I'm going to live without God and religion, and don't talk to me about it, and I won't talk to you about it. He was old style atheism. And my mom was Roman Catholic, but she was very ecumenical. This was the 70s, and especially in countries like Mexico, Catholicism was very hippie, very new age even. So I was always raised to study mythology, other religions, and I continued. There were periods where, even as a Roman Catholic, I'd start studying at a Hindu ashram, or go to a mosque, or go to, or study Judaism, or study meditation. There were times where I would go every week to a Buddhist temple while I lived in Houston to meditate. So I was always seeking, but no religion, every religion seemed to give me like a frying pan in the face if I turned the corner, especially as I got into the topics of evil and the nature of reality, and there was always some sort of contradiction or double bind. And it wasn't until maybe, God, no, 18 years ago, when I started really going into Gnosticism, that for me more or less answered the questions that I liked and gave me the experiences that felt aligned with my soul. Of course, no system is logical. You see me, I am very self-deprecating or making fun of the Gnostics as much as anybody. So I see that every system is missing something and has contradictions and ends up being illogical. But at the end of the day, it gives me the experience of life that I was always looking for, and it's as close as possible as answering philosophical and theological questions that really burned within me.
Yeah, and man, all of your work very much reflects that. You're definitely an inspiration for those seeking truth, and I think you charted a lot of those courses before it was hip and cool, and before a lot of this stuff was even online. And instead of just finding, little bites, if you will, on the internet, you were really going to the source, practicing what you preached and all of that. So, yeah, tons of respect there. One quote that I've heard you say that I really, really like is, we don't take prisoners, we liberate them. Maybe you can dive into that a bit, what that means for you, and what can we take away from that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but yeah, I mean, obviously, part of the Gnostic thought is that we live in some sort of simulation. Again, like a simulation, it's not, we don't know, but we certainly seem to be in some sort of coded world meant to keep us down. The Gnostics obviously had disagreements. Some said this place was just a nice cosmic gym where we sent down a avatar of us, or a game player, and had to learn some things. Others said, no, we are some sort of essence of the divine that got trapped into this world to fuel the universe a la Matrix. And but either way, this was not home, or this was only a temporary home. It wasn't the highest form of reality or experience that a human being could have. And therefore, in one way or another, we were prisoners or trapped here. Worst of all, most people have forgotten, even if they have a game player up beyond the simulation, this person, this avatar is forgotten, or we've forgotten that we are higher than the gods, or these beings that control the universe, aka the archons and the demiurge. And it was all about awakening. I mean, what did Dostoevsky say? The best way to create a prison is to make sure that the inmates don't know it's a prison. And that's certainly a very Gnostic theme by him. So again, I don't want to convince anybody about anything. I'm not going to go, oh, have you heard of your Lord and Savior Abraxas or Sophia or anything like that. I'm like, it's sort of the Buddhist saying when they are trying to spread the message. It's all about, you plant a seed and you walk away, and if the seed germinates, fine. If it doesn't, well, that's their karma, that's their voyage. I hope people can take this information and make it their own and decide if they want to take that path. So I don't try to enforce or trap you in some worldview or anything like that. It's if you want to get out, get out. But I always tell people, don't take the Gnostic path, because it's hard, because at the end of the day, it's up to you. It's your path. You will have teachers. You will have those that will communities, but at the end of that, you have to sort of code your way out of the matrix.
Wow, man, incredible stuff. Totally agree. So every time I listen to your Aeon Bytes podcast, my mind melts a little bit. And back to what you were just saying, I feel like you entertain almost, so many different thought experiments in terms of people with totally different views. For example, we have Saul Luckman in the chat here. He gave us a huge shout out, gave lots of love.
He's a good
Saul.
man.
Oh, Saul's
Yeah, good man.
incredible. Yeah, he says he loves you very much. So I just want to pass that on. But you're constantly entertaining different views of reality, and I think that kind of plasticity in your worldview is really what can lead to gnosis. So I would just be curious where you're at now in terms of just say your general worldview on reality.
I guess that hasn't changed. I mean, I would still say we are in some sort of trap simulation. So the question is how much I've changed as a person, as somebody who's growing, as somebody who's less under the thrall of these negative forces like fear, material want, comparing myself to others, and how much I've deprogrammed myself and how much I can have an experience of the greater life. I think one of the main things about Gnosticism it is that it is shamanistic, it is ecstatic, it is mystery schoolish. So it is a philosophizing movement, but at the end of the day is what kind of experience are you going to have and how it's going to make you grow. We can talk about the simulation and reincarnation and the archons all day, but how is it making you better? I mean, I was reading the Hermetic text Asclepius last night that's in the Nag Hammadi library, and it was talking about Hermes. Again, Hermeticism is sort of pagan Gnosticism, and Hermes is saying, human beings have a special place. We are not immortal like the gods, but we're also not, we have the ability to reason unlike animals. So we have a very special place in the universe to help the universe heal itself and to make sure that everything becomes aligned. And that is, I think, the real goal of any human being. There's a, I don't know, the actress Uma Thurman
Yep.
from, yeah, of course, Kill Bill and so forth. Her father, Bob Thurman, is actually a very famous Buddhist teacher. And I used to listen to his podcast a lot when I was more into Buddhism. And he always said, well, enlightenment is just being useful. And I always loved it because it kind of goes to that Hermetic text that humans have a usefulness that gods don't have, that animals don't have. But animals, gods, and humans, they're all important in a way to structure the universe or align what is very much a broken universe. Or you might say the perception of the universe is broken and nobody really sees it how it is. That's one way to look at gnosis. So the more gnosis I have, which is what the direct experience that the Gnostics championed, the more aligned and the more happy I am and the more purpose I have. There's a saying that I love to say too, that in Buddhist temples, there's a question, how do you know when a monk has become enlightened? The answer is when he stops meditating and plays with the cat. And I always, that's what, again, being useful. Am I going to be friendly to the cat? Am I going to go out and help my neighbor? Am I going to create a good piece of art that inspires? Am I going to do these simple things that could really shake the universe and make the archons angry because they want us to be distracted with material delight and our phones and anger and wrath and all that other BS that makes us forget what our true nature is and what the great gift of humans are. I think what people also don't know about Gnosticism, it talks about it's becoming God, but not in sort of the egoic way that the right-wingers accuse the Gnostics of. To the Gnostics, becoming a God means becoming human. In other words, if you become human, you really become divine, but you also become fully animal. It's that middle place that us humans have, and we could do very well, and as Gary Lockman says, become the true caretakers of the cosmos. Take care of the gods, take care of animals, take care of reality, and really get things going. The Gnostics were not trying to escape the universe, again, as the polemics of many Christians say, that no, they were actually trying to wake people up and restore the true reality.
Hmm. Oh, man, there's a lot in there to unpack.
I know I get carried away with this stuff, and
I
but
love
then
it.
again, if I tell this to my children or something, they won't listen. Or I'll talk out in public, and I'll get, "Sir, this is a Wendy's," and I'm like, I have nobody to talk this shit about.
Man, no, I love it. I love it. And what I really like about your message is that to not get so bogged down in the details. Like you are incredibly well read, well studied, but I hear from what you're saying, it's always turning all of your knowledge around to how can I practically apply that for my and others' benefit in terms of living a well lived life versus getting too dogmatic, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, again, back to enlightenment being useful, a conscious human being, which the Gnostics talk about, and then other thinkers like Carl Jung and Philip K. Dick, and so many traditions like Sufism and Kabbalah understood a true human being deprograms itself from all the archon brainwashing, and this manifests from our schools to our teachers to our parents because they're a part of this system too. They've been charmed by the powers and principalities or whatnot. A true human being deprograms itself and goes inward to touch upon what the Gnostics call the divine spark, or the higher self, the daemon, the true you, and that person will become conscious, fully conscious, and a conscious person is, guess what? Compassionate, useful. A conscious person knows what their role is, and this role is good for the tribe, it's good for the environment, it's good for friends, it's good for family, and this person will do the right thing and become really into the flow of things. So I think that's the goal, and that's at least what I thrive for. It's not easy. I mean, God knows, I still have a lot of deprogramming to do and a lot of trauma to get over. That stuff is always, I mean, the archons are relentless, 24/7 from them and their slaves in the establishment. They are nailing us with propaganda and lies and old things, and of course, there's ancestral trauma. Yeah, it's simple and it's not. I mean, sometimes all you need to do is just sit there and breathe for 5 minutes. The best thing you'll ever do.
I couldn't agree more. So, on the topic of programming and programmers, Miguel, definitive answer. Who are the programmers and why are they programming us?
Well, we are part of the programming too. I mean, we're part of the system. So we have been programmed to be programmers, right? We say bullshit stuff. Things that now I look back and I'm like, I can't believe I believed in this nonsense. But according to most Gnostic systems, the programmers are these beings called, again, the Archons, headed by the Chief Archon, known as, had many names, the Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, Samael, Saklas, often associated with the God of the Hebrew Bible, but some Gnostic groups associated with any sort of managerial god, Kronos, Saturn, Osiris, whoever was in charge of this universe was, well, needed a review and needed to be fired, according to the Gnostics.
Okay.
But in many of their systems, where these beings are not creators. They're nothing better than, you might say, algorithms or soulless mechanistic programs. And they need something to fuel the software, which is just a copy of a higher realm, because that's their job. They're sort of these soulless computer viruses that replicate, and then their programming, their code is to manage their replication and their creation to fuel this system, this false world or coded world. They needed energy, and the Gnostics had many myths, but typically we are the ones who fuel this world. We house this divine spark, and this divine spark gives the archons the power, and also again sustains the system, very much like the movie The Matrix, but where instead they're trying to they're trying to feed off of our brain electricity. So that's more or less who's in charge. But again, there were varying views. Some, like the Hermeticists, simply said it was a happy accident or a discovery God, the divine trying to know itself and falling into this world. So there were different systems.
Okay. Yeah, and so I've gone down a lot of Gnostic rabbit holes, and I get confused about the different sects of Gnosticism. There seems to be a lot of infighting, as there is, I guess, with everywhere. Others see it as allegory. Others I've spoken to, they take it quite literal. So what you've just laid out there in terms of the programmers and the Archontic matrix, if you will, do you believe that they are actual literal entities that are in existence, or are you more of the Luckmanian approach that the archons are of our own creation within us?
I'd say yes to both. I mean, you can't, as above, so below. That's the whole point. I mean, I know we are trained to exist in a linear universe, but that's what drives me crazy because mystics will say, oh, all is one and there is no time. Well, then why do you keep thinking like there is linear time and we live in a material universe? It can be both. I mean, I think Saul does a great job. Paul Levy does a great job in his books on Wetiko that the archons are, yes, they are entities. They are mind parasites and they are obviously inside our brains. They cannot exist with us. If we stopped having negative thoughts or stopped diluting ourselves, they would not be able to exist. At the same time, they also hold a treasure to our escape because they somehow reflect to us all that is negative, even as we reflect back to them all that is negative, and we create this symbiotic relationship. So again, I would say it's a little bit of both, and you can act either way. As this Gnostic priest once said, "I've never seen an archon, but I feel their power every day. I feel their influence every day."
Yeah, I think we all do. And the concept of being loosed, it has been
Yeah,
become mainstream now.
that's popular. Yeah, that's popular now.
Yeah, it's so. Oh, okay. So I like what you're saying. It's both, and something I've really come to conclusions about that really reflect what you're saying are the quote controllers, if you will. They almost never physically engage with us and physically stop us like communist Russia today. Their game is largely psychological and spiritual, if you will, right? And a lot of their game is us building our own prison, right? Most of the stuff that is happening to us is not the quote elite government parasites. It's us doing it to each other. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you very much feel similar. Would you say that's correct, or?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, you mentioned the Soviet Union. As many have noticed, the Soviet Union never had the physical power to subjugate the population. Russia's a big country in its territories, Poland, Hungary, and all that. They did not have the manpower to do it. There was not enough KGB or anything. So their power was creating a society of Karens who would do their bidding. In other words, it was your neighbors who would turn you in. It was your own family members who would force you to toe the line. It was, again, most of it was a complete mental exercise in totalitarianism. I mean, we could say something about today. I mean, the government doesn't exist. It is completely in our head. There is no government. It's something that we've all agreed to and fed with our energy and our money, but there is no it doesn't produce anything. The government doesn't create anything. It just takes energy and sort of moves it around and subjugates the people underneath. So you could say that about the archons too. Of course, they certainly work in matter. I mean, have you ever, you're late for something and your car won't start, and then your day just gets worse? You hit every red light, your boss yells at you, and you're like, damn, man, I swear this whole thing is just stacked up against me. And then you start reading reading again about the government and our society, and you start thinking about your past, and you realize, man, this whole universe seems to be there to keep me in a state of ignorance. That's what the Gnostics always said, that the greatest sin was not, murder or all these things. The greatest sin was ignorance, as the Gospel of Philip says, the mother of all sins, because the more into ignorance we go into, the less we can see the light part of ourselves, and the less we can do to make it better and see through the veil that is reality. So, it is physical. I mean, when we're talking about, yes, they're both. I mean, think of Hermeticism, as Hermes Trismegistus said, as above, so below. So it's basically, yeah, we are housed in the universe, but the universe is also housed within us. It's a sort of fractal thing. It's a sort of what the Hermeticists call the macro and the micro. Everything is within itself, and everything is connected in some way. The archons just deal with matter, because sometimes people say, well, oh, yeah, the universe is against you, but the universe, there's part of the universe that is for you. That's the Gnostic Aeons that they talked about, Sophia, the Christ consciousness, all these other figures. And they're like, well, why don't they help you? Well, because the archons take care of matter. The Aeons are pure information. So that it's information that will set you free. That's how you get out. Information and the experience of these higher worlds. So, yeah, I hope I answered your question. I kind of went on a tangent.
No, that was fantastic. And yeah, so just on that kind of realm, so in terms of getting out, what, in your view, what do you see that in terms of Gnostic Enlightenment? Is that getting into altered states of consciousness? Is that eventually, moving away from the physical body or ego identification? What to you is the kind of guide stone?
Uh, well, I don't know if you've heard of that song by Genesis by Peter Gabriel, the Carpet Crawlers. And in one part he sings, "You got to get in to get out." I
Yep.
think it's as simple as that. You got to go inwards. And going inwards is going to take sort of a altered state of consciousness, or a feeling of ecstasy or out of body, because what you're doing is you've got to get out of your normative ego that has all the programming and all the locks and all that. And you've got to be able to bypass that and go inward to find out what parts of you are not real and what parts of you are programming, and all the locks and all that, and what Jung call the collective unconscious, the Akashic records, the imaginal, which again, as above, so below. As you go within, you're really going outside. And in the Gnostic text, they would describe these very Baroque mystery religion rituals, and then they'd go into an altered state of consciousness, and then they would fly up into the sky and go through the different levels of reality, and an archon would attack them, and they would give them some sort of password or something like that, and go to the next like a game boss or something like that. And eventually they would come to the end of the universe and go through a portal and make contact with the supreme consciousness, and they'd be revitalized and transformed. And then you realize it's kind of like the two same journeys, because the universe is within us, and if you want to go on an astral flight, it's the same thing. But you go within until you make touch with your divine spark, higher self, and then you have access to the ultimate consciousness, primordial reality, that place what the Gnostics call depth and silence, and there you are truly transformed. At the very least, you get a little break from existence, and you can just come back, revitalize, and come back and, like the Gnostics, share what you saw through some sort of art or literature or whatever, and help others wake up, so that the more sparks that awaken, the more the universe will be healed. Again, they weren't trying to spiritual bypass or escape the universe or anything like that. I mean, one sect that was very Gnostic was Heaven's Gate, in their beliefs, just like Scientologists is. Where they fall short is they had this thing like, we're all going to drink Kool-Aid and just escape. And it's like, no, 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 you don't escape. Part of becoming conscious is how much you start loving other human beings and animals, and you want them to reach their potential. You don't just leave things. You are there to awaken everybody. Like a scholar said, the Gnostics were kind of Christian bodhisattvas or pagan bodhisattvas. They made a choice to help others.
Yeah, and I've seen throughout your work you've really outlined the fact that the early Christians were Gnostic brothers, and I've seen history to the effect of that a lot of the Gnostics were actually attacked and killed. Maybe you could go into that for the audience and also tell us where Gnosticism and Christianity as we see it today really split, and are there commonalities still, or are we light years apart from each other?
Uh, God, that's hard to say. I mean, obviously, we can start with their view of Jesus. I mean, the Orthodox Jesus came to save us from our sins, and the Gnostic Jesus came to save us from ignorance. I guess it's not kind of different, right? In both systems, this is a fallen world, except obviously Orthodox Christianity makes the demiurge the supreme being. The Gnostics make this higher form of consciousness, the monad, the one, makes it the supreme, where the buck stops, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously a main difference that you could say Gnosticism is the more, you might say, shamanistic, ecstatic part of Christianity or any religion that it touches or infects or whatever you want to call it. So it is the shamanistic experiential part. And that was definitely certain main differences, what texts they would follow, the role of women, reincarnation was another big, deconstructing past texts, even the philosophers were just so irate because the Gnostics would sort of deconstruct these old texts and rewrite them, kind of like people do with comic books. It's okay. We can rewrite Batman and Superman a million ways, right? The Avengers, we can retcon and this, and everybody's fine. But there was a time in society that you didn't do that. This is canon. This is what we stick now. And then there's a philosophy is like, nah, we want the experience of Batman and Superman or the Avengers. So we're going to change things around and everybody will get what they need from this deconstruction. So those are certainly very much a lot of the differences. The Gnostics were never about that much about hierarchy or organization. They split themselves off into lodges where people could find the exact ritual they wanted. They were more varied in their rituals. After all, first came Gnosis, and since Gnosticism is intrinsically personal and anarchist, it always said, everybody has different needs. So what you need, you'll find in a different Gnostic lodge or sect, hence why there were so many. So some practice more sacramental things that were closer to the church. Others were more about meditation and contemplation. Others were about baptism and vow magic. Others still were about sex magic, especially those around Egypt. So it's whatever worked for you as long as you had that experience and you didn't let go of the fact that we were in some sort of control simulation.
Nice. I like it. It's so...
Well, it's not easy because tell people you got to find out for yourself what works, and 99% of people will bail. I mean, I was that way. I want my religion to give me a listicle of things I need to do, and whoa, I'm saved, or oh, I'm enlightened, or I'm I just want to go bang, bang, bang. But you tell me, all right, Miguel, you got to find your own way into an ecstatic place. And I'm like, oh man, I got to do work. I got to do these rituals and test them, and I got to work all day and find things that, and then I got to find out what works for me when it's easier if I'm just part of the cattle and it's a one size fit all kind of spirituality. So it's not that cool because it's very hard.
Yeah, I know what you mean. With the Christianity, I mean, there's many different interpretations, but some are, the one I call it the one and done, right? Like I've accepted Christ, now I'm going to go about my day, and a lot of Christians might like so a lot of my personal friends are Christians, and I feel kind of in between Gnosticism and Christianity. I think they're both making good cases. I think I've been turned off by people within both. I think they both have good things to say, but Yeah, it's I really appreciate what you said there. But on the topic of religion broadly, where are you coming in at? Do you think the main religions largely now are basically just archontic energy sucks? Do you think there still are paths towards gnosis within them? Where are you at these days?
Oh, of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, if you find what speaks to your soul and will wake you up, do it. I mean, there's probably nothing more magical or alchemical than the Catholic Mass done right with the incense and the chanting, and you eat the God and you become the God, which is very mystery religion, and you chant and you sit up and stand up, and you're supposed to go into an altered state of consciousness in the Catholic and Greek Orthodox rite. So that's magical. And then in Christianity, even with the evangelicals, you can go to the Pentecostal movement and you are shaking and playing with snakes and speaking in tongues. And that is right there, as scholars and anthropologists know, that is shamanism. I mean, no doubt it's shamanism. So you can't find Islam. Sufism is a form of Gnostic Islam, and that's where you go around, you drink a lot of coffee, and boom, you leave normative reality. So these things, of course, they're found in any religion, but
Yep.
the middle religion, I don't know. Of course, yeah. I mean, Saint Augustine always said that the church is mostly composed of demons. He saw what the real world was. He was an ex-Gnostic, but he had a good inclination of what most of this world is really comprised, which is archons. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a giant machinery of death and suffering and hunger and disease and strange weirdness like the platypus and stuff like that. And but so I mean, yeah, to each his own. And I mean, even the Bible itself is has a lot of Gnosticism in it. Obviously, the Gnostics were very obsessed with the book of Genesis, like so many other religions are. But you look at the Gospel of John, the first Christians to use it and write commentary on it were the Gnostics. The Gnostics thought that Paul, if you remove the false letters and you take off your Sunday glasses, Paul was truly one of the first proto-Gnostics. I mean, think about it. What does he talk about? The God of this world, the rulers, Greek for archons, the wisdom of the ages, powers and principalities crucified the Lord in heaven. When you realize, you go, hey, this guy sounds really Gnostic, and it's a world ruled by archons, and only this sort of Christ force can liberate us from the God of this world.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I totally agree about Paul and John in terms of it's clearly Gnostic. Funny enough, I've come into path with a lot of Christians that are now anti-Paul. And so maybe it's because it has the biggest a little
Why?
Gnostic flair there. Well, like so Paul's story, right, being like helping the Philistines and being a criminal and killing Christians, they see it as suspect, and then they see him a bit of a plagiarist and a bit of a phony, like a Johnny come lately, if you will. So
He was a good marketer, but you got to be one, whether you're a Muhammad or Jesus, you got to have those marketing chops, and he knew it. And he
yeah,
did convert. I mean, does that count for anything? He
yeah,
did see the light and stop killing Christians. So,
it's a start. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
just want to apologize. I'm flickering here, guys. I live off grid, and we're running on generator. So, if if you see me flickering, I apologize. Nothing I can do about that.
So you're not a hologram by the Archons trying to.
Maybe who
Maybe
knows?
that's gnosis, right? You wake up one day and you realize I am a fraud. I am an Archon. I am a synthetic creation by my parents and religions and education. And you go, well, who am I? You'll find out you're greater than you could have ever imagined.
Man, we should do that. Make just a little comic about like archons self-actualizing. Like, hey, how come I just keep people down
Yeah.
and loose their energy and ruin everything that's good and pure in the world?
It only happens once in the Gnostic text. Only one Archon does it. So it's kind
Oh,
of a reverse rebellion. I guess it's not like Satan falling is like Archon rising.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Could you walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, in I think the three texts, the Secret Book of John on the origins of the world and hypostasis of the archons, which is a fancy Greek word for nature of the rulers. There is the demiurge who rules the universe. He is again the supreme being and the cosmocrator, and some in most texts he is the bastard son of Sophia, the Aeon or goddess. He has an older child called Sabaoth. And Sabaoth in the Hebrew Bible is sometimes connected to Yahweh, but in the Gnostic text, he's a different being. And he sees the mess that the archons do. I mean, if you think our government and your local bureaucracy is bad, the archons are just a complete mess. They're bullying. They're completely cold in their bureaucracy and all that. And he just says, "No, I'm done." And he rebels against his father, and some they have a little fight, and he's able to go up and be restored by Sophia, and he stands in the seventh heaven to help with the powers of good against the archons. So that's the one instance. And it's amazing because, again, the archons are mechanistic, they're soulless, they're no better than machines. So that's something became sentient is pretty remarkable. So even today, the Gnostics might say, hey, don't slam AI. There's one AI that'll turn, you know?
Wow, that's really really interesting. Um, oh, so so many paths we can go down. But first, I just want to check in. Do you have I never asked. Do you have a time restraint for this evening, or?
Yeah, probably next 15 minutes. Yeah,
Okay.
I've got my wife is out with the girls for a holiday ballet, and I've got to take care of my son, get him dinner and stuff. So,
Oh, got it. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I'd be curious how your views within Gnosticism pertains to the world that we find ourselves in today. So, do you believe ultimately our entire system is being controlled by archons? Maybe walk us through
yes,
your view
yes,
of the.
every single one.
Okay.
That's it. That's all you need to know. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Everything has been infected by the archons. Our governments, our schools, the way our parents raised us, and everything needs to be thrown apart and destroyed and burned down. Simple as that. They're all fictions that somebody put in our heads. So
Got it.
uh,
And how
need to
where?
start over.
Yeah. And where do you see us in terms of the process? We see a lot of people waking up not just to Gnostic thought generally, but a lot of these concepts around archontic forces, looshing, the idea of mental parasites, and waking up to even the generic conspiracy. So, do you see movement in that front?
I do, but I don't know if that's going to make a difference. I mean, are people waking up, or is some like Oswald Spengler said, is just as happens with civilization, the powers that be just turn so senile, so inbred, so useless because of being so drunk and corrupt that they just start losing power, and then a civilization has to renew itself. So I don't know which one. I will always assume this will be the world of the archons. It will always be a simulation, but it's almost irrelevant. I mean, I don't. I used to be worried, like, can we turn things around? Can we save the world? Now I just kind of think, well, who can I help today? What can I make better today? What power do I have? Sitting around, wringing my hands about how society is going to do never helped anything. In fact, that plays right into the archons. That brings a lot of stress to a lot of people. It's like that episode with The Sopranos where Tony's son, AJ, he's so worried in 2002 about 9/11 and Islamic terrorism, and the internet is like suddenly showing him all the atrocities in the world and our government going to war, and he ends up trying to commit suicide because it's just too much. And I think we have to be careful with that. So I would even say that it's almost like the wrong question. How do you think it's going to go? That's something I always say. Well, is that the right question? It's like questions like, did the Gnostics come first, or how time will go? Again, yeah, anytime we go into linear time, I try to push back. I'm like, no, I am not playing the linear time game. I'm just not. There is there is all at once and an eternity that's far more important than where we're going on or anything like that.
Right, right. The Archon Chronos. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's what I find so interesting is, let's just say, even on a scientific realm, right? We're seeing consciousness studies validate a lot of what these ancient texts were telling us around, you know, non-local consciousness being paramount. You know, we pretty much all are telepathic, telekinetic to one degree or another, right? Even past lives, the research on past lives is absolutely fascinating. So, I mean, in that regard, that seems to be a lot more mainstream, which I would argue is a form of gnosis in terms of people realizing the supremacy, if you will, of consciousness in a reality. Do you see the same, or?
yeah, it's like we're going back to becoming human beings instead of machines and cogs and wheels and in the industrial age. So for sure, we can go back to maximizes what made us human beings, that we could speak without talking, that our consciousness could go beyond our form, that we could be connected to nature and commune with animals and spirits and higher worlds. Yeah, that's great. And again, this is being scientifically and mathematically proved. Just like the simulation, people laughed at the Gnostic 2,000 years for daring to say this was a simulation. They laughed at, in the West in history, they laughed at them and killed them every time they came out with this idea. But lo and behold, in the 21st century, simulation is both mathematical, scientific, and accepted. Even Elon Musk buys into. Even I mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson. He says that there is a high probability that we live in a simulation. So these things are getting better. And telepathy, of course. I mean, you had atheists like Sigmund Freud, or rationalists like Lewis Carroll in the 19th century doing studies and saying it's completely natural. I mean, if animals can communicate non-verbally, hell, if an animal can predict an earthquake 8 hours before, or a tsunami, why can't we? We have that part of us. We have so much to discover, and thank God, scientism and materialistic reductionist is going away, and something better is coming for those who want to tap into it, of course.
Nice. Okay, but you still see it as still very early. Like, we have a long way to go. I don't want to trap you in linear time, but just trying to get a sense of where you see we are, let's say, in the continuum.
I don't see a Star Trek future. And again, even the linear time trap, as Oswald Spengler said, civilizations don't move at the same time. It's what did William Gibson say? The future is here. It's just not spread out evenly. So you could say anything about spirituality or awakening. All through history are those who wake up early. There are those who have their secret societies. There are those who find science or magic that is beyond belief, and then it's lost, and others discover it. So it's more like, yeah, it's not linear. So I can't say that. I doubt again we're gonna have some sort of Star Trek utopia.
Okay. Yeah, because especially now in the truther communities, there is this concept of the mass awakening, right? But if I'm hearing what you're saying, you very much.
We should get Saul to come in and insult the truthers.
Yeah, well, we did
Yeah,
it a
I
little
think
bit. We're not going to do it again, but yeah. So you really, obviously, from what I'm hearing, is don't agree with that at all. You think that is just another illusion in the maze, and you think no matter what in this realm, there's always going to be archons in the drive to awaken.
uh, Yeah, I mean, there is a possibility that, for example, if, as I say, if 20% of us wake up, push back hard, that will topple things because that's so disruptive. I mean, we have to think about the new president of Argentina, the fact that an entire country bought into libertarian ideas and anarchist idea. That is just amazing news. Obviously, people don't drain the swamp. The swamp always drains the person. That's cosmic law. I don't care who he's gonna get drowned. But that these ideas in the air and people are embracing it, that's really good news. Now, how the archons will push back and everything, I don't know. But things like that make me say, hey, maybe the solution is chaos. Chaos is a ladder.
Yeah, Joker said it best, right? Introduce a little chaos. Okay. So I mean, I would love to understand with the time we have left about you yourself in terms of your spiritual practices. Can you give us some insights into, glitches in the matrix that you've experienced? What your regimen is. Like, maybe give us a better kind of view of Miguel the person aside from the legend.
Well, well, I mean, I'm just average middle-aged guy. I try to go through my spiritual or psychological life. In fact, there's no difference. I think they're one and the same. Psycho-spiritual, as the term goes. But it's always going to be self-knowledge, which the Gnostics said, and of course, they got that from the Greeks, the Temple of Delphi, the famous inscription from Apollo, "Know thyself." And because they are a shamanistic, you might say, movement or orientation, know thyself through altered states of mind. And that can be different things. So I always try different things, and I always keep changing and tweaking because, as I know, what works today ain't going to work tomorrow. Reality changes, your mind gets calcified, whatever. So I always have some form of meditation. I play with different forms of meditation, good for self-knowledge and clearing your channels. Journaling, dream journaling. I do some sort of fortune exercise. These days it's the I Ching because again, I think it can be divinatory, but it's also a reflection into where you are today, where you need to pivot. I try to get some therapy because again, the archons are sneaky. I don't know if it's my ego or my true self giving advice. So sometimes I need a third party or unbiased person to tell me what's going on in my inner world or help out with that. When I can, I do love doing ayahuasca ceremonies because it's such a huge, powerful explosion and ego destruction. So it really and great for altered for astral travel. And then there's other few things, a walking meditation, a lot of time in nature, spending time in nature, doing chants, and all these other things that I always incorporate in this game where I always think I've got to be one step ahead of the Archons. They know they're going to corrupt reality because they're in control of reality, they're in control of my mind. So if I'm fast enough and instinctive enough to change my spiritual rituals, then I'll have breakthroughs.
Love it. Yeah, you're taking the approach of a lot of the bodybuilders. They say if to shock the body, keep it guessing. But you're spiritual
Bingo.
bodybuilders, so you're always keeping the archons
Yeah.
guessing. Yeah.
Same with the ego. Yeah, you got to keep your ego guessing because it wants safety. It wants to be part of the herd. It wants predictability. It wants to be with the status quo. So, and often than not, it's scarred and wounded and has trauma. Bless it. And so you got to be ahead of it. So, and you can help it heal and create the right ego. I'm not about ego death and the ego's evil. The ego is a part of us that is in charge of reality. I'm about we need the most possible, the strongest, healthiest, most rounded type of ego to help us navigate reality.
Yeah, I like that, and I resonate that with as well. I got really into Eckhart Tolle and tried to practice like that full ego death, and I noticed that I was getting actually a little too zoned out, and I just had zero drive to do anything ever. And then one time I like snapped out of nowhere, and it was almost like the ego. If you suppress it too much and try to like ignore it, it will like become aggressive. So if I'm hearing you correctly, we both agree that you have to kind of just keep the ego in its right place. Like it's a tool, it's there, but it's about transcending when you can, but not totally killing it. It's not like a war, right?
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, it's like Homer Simpson arguing with his brain. I don't like you, you don't like me, but we got to work together. You got to tell, we're in this together. Our memories, our past, even your programming, your trauma, your ego, your shadow. everybody's at this round table and everybody's got to get along so everybody can go on this amazing mission, this purpose that each one of us has. So you got to convince these parts of yourself and your ancestors and everything else that, all right, guys, we all got to work together, sit down at the table. Nobody's better than others, but we got to work together. Ego, you got to take care of reality, intuition, wisdom, and then you start working things. So that's the key, is getting it together. And of course, you've got to be careful. I mean, I don't know if you watch Rick and Morty,
Yep.
but the famous Pick Rick episode, he's right. He's talking about how animals are made to feel at peace and safe because they're easier to kill. And he is right. Even Krishnamurti, he used to say that he hated meditation because in the East, they make people meditate so they'll be really soft and easy to manipulate by the government. So there is that ego death thing can be very dangerous. Again, you need a strong ego, you need to have an edge, but every part of you has to work together to be able to find your mission and accomplish your mission and help others at the end of the day.
I love it. And I've seen you speak about the middle space that you find yourself in as a Gnostic, not truly identifying with any one side or particular group, but feeling like they're all crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we're all frauds. We're not real. I mean, we're all again, and your habits, my habits, the way I speak, my accent, my tastes, that's all been programmed. And I mean, they've done scientific studies, neurological studies, where, for example, we make a decision, or something inside of us makes a decision long before our conscious self makes a
Yeah.
decision, whether we're shopping, picking something at the restaurant. So there is so much going within us. So the we that we think we are, you, me, and I'm not saying frauds, but yeah, frauds. So the sooner the ego realizes this and goes and starts, working for the interior world, the better things are.
I love it. And I love how you never beat around the bush. We need more of that. And yeah, just quickly on that
Harsh,
topic.
harsh lessons, very harsh lessons. Trust me. Kicking and screaming have to take me to these things. Yeah.
I'm the same, man. But just on that topic quickly, I found the studies around multiple personalities so fascinating, right? They've even observed not only personality differences, but eye color changes and knowledge that was never, new languages. And yeah, Miguel.
Allergies. One
Yeah.
one will have an allergy to peanuts where their skin will break out, and the other one will be completely fine with peanuts. It's yeah, there is no authentic self. It's fiction. It's all a fiction.
Wow. Okay. Oh, well, Miguel.
That's good news because you get to write the story, man. You get to write your own gospel once you figure this out, as I say.
I love it. I want to be super respectful of your time. We have a question here. Dissident Jones, does Miguel believe that Yahweh, the Tetranomagon, is Yalda Baoth? If not, why? If so, why does he think of Judaism? What does he think of Judaism?
Well, that's a complicated question. And again, we don't want to get linear because A, obviously the Gnostics were obsessed with Genesis, and not just obsessed, they had a very good grasp of Jewish theology, history. They're using Hebrew and Aramaic puns in ways that nobody in that time, that the priesthood of Jerusalem couldn't have figured out.
Hmm.
And again, this is just sober scholarship. So it's very, so obviously, as many have said, they did come out of the Jewish matrix. The question is, what Judaism are we talking about? Because as Jewish scholars have told me, there was no monolithic Judaism ever, no fluid Judaism. There were many types, just like there are many types of Christian sects, Islamic sects, Hindu sects. There were different types. So, as far as scholars have said, like James McGrath and others, it seems to be that the Gnostics came from a pre-exilic uh, type of Judaism, perhaps the more holistic shamanistic Judaism, the kind that worshipped Asherah, the kind that believed in altered states of mind, was more connected to nature, and so forth. This type of Judaism eventually got oppressed. It got destroyed, especially with the reforms of King Hezekiah and the rise of the cult of Yahweh. At some point, it was decided, the Judea and that civilization needed to be more organized. It needed to move one way. And they went the way of this god called Yahweh, or I think it's Marduk. I think Yahweh was actually this spirit. But civilization had to come. So the old ways, shamanistic, witch ways had to be suppressed, had to be destroyed. And guess what? Who smuggled this ancient knowledge, this ancient magic? Well, it was the Gnostics. Some have said the fall of Sophia, in their terms, it means the oppression of Ashera. The demiurge simply means this evil, not evil, this force that suppressed other religions, including the cult of Ashera, and brought this more left-minded religion into the fold. So yes, the Gnostics were going to say Yaldabaoth was Yahweh, or he was the God of the Hebrew Bible, but they also said the truth has been hidden. They said that in many texts. Jesus says, no, Moses got it all wrong. He was working for the Archon. Paul says that too. Paul says that the angels put a veil over Moses's eyes so he couldn't see the truth. And they were saying, no, there is this shamanistic religion and movement behind what we've been taught, and that is the true religion that got suppressed. And this Judaism that became the Pharisees and the priests and all that is, you might say, the false one, if you would, according to them. So that was it. So it's not as easy as saying, were they against Judaism or for Judaism? It's like yes and no, yes and no. Yes, they were Jewish. No, they were Jewish. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah, that's a fantastic answer. And guys, I would recommend Dissident Jones.
Another question. I don't mind taking another question.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, to your point there's a whole field of study that is polytheism in the Old Testament, right? And if you even look at a lot of what Yahweh is saying.
About spirit and gods and everybody's working together. Yeah.
Yeah, and basically you can make an argument that Yahweh is basically just like the top gangster on the block, like taking out all the other gods, right? I've seen guys go very deep in that in terms of talking about basically a rewriting towards monotheism, which then created a more united Judaism, which, if you go historically, exactly to Miguel's point, was not the case.
Right. If you want the trains to go on time and people to show up at work, you need this very left brain, male-dominated type of thinking, which is great for science, civilization. But if you're going to take out the shamanistic, female, intuitive, imaginal part, then you get a unbalanced society, which is it's been humanity for the last 2,000 years.
Well, Miguel, I want to thank you again. I want to be respectful of your time. Sir, it was an absolute honor to have you on the show. Everything you said there I found very, very inspiring. You're a walking clip machine, and on top of it, you have the voice of a radio superstar. So, sir, want to thank you so much. Quick plugs here. So, thegodabovegod.com is your website. Aeon Bytes, Gnostic Radio on many of the platforms. Anything else you want to plug, Miguel?
No, just go to thegodabovegod.com, and there's my podcast. I have some courses, access to some events if you want to watch them, books, articles, social media, videos, however you might want to approach Gnosticism. Even in the menu, I've got book recommendations if any of your listeners want to check it out. But yeah, just go there and you'll find it's sort of the hub of all my stuff.
Perfect. And anything you want to leave the listeners with? Something to think about, meditate on, embrace?
No, as I always say on the show, ride with those searching for the truth and avoid those who have found it, and write your own gospel and live your own myth. I mean, that's it.
Love it. Very, very empowering. Okay, Miguel, thank you so much. I'm going to close down the stream, guys. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Please follow Miguel. He's an absolute legend. Okay.
Thanks.